Are you listening, Obi?
Yes.
Those who follow the messenger. Who's the messenger?
Those who follow the Prophet ﷺ.
The prophet. So that means we're talking about people in the 7th century, right?
I don't know what verse you're talking
Right.
about.
The unlettered prophet whom they find mentioned in their own scriptures.
Yes,
right.
yes.
The law and the gospel.
Yes.
So we agree that the gospel was there in the 7th century, don't we?
And Injil, or fragments of it, yes. That's
No,
what
it doesn't
like.
say fragments.
Okay, well,
Where does it say fragments?
You just said to me that the gospel you know doesn't mention my prophet's name. So
Correct.
It can't be the same Injil.
Correct.
No. It can't be the same Injil.
So now let's address that point. Let's address that point.
Please.
Here's a better way to understand it. The Quran is just wrong. Because we know, yes, the Quran is just flat out wrong. The Quran is just flat out wrong. And here's why we know.
Straight out left field.
Here's why we know. The Quran is just wrong. You're right, straight out left field.
Careful.
Because we have manuscripts from the 7th century.
That's fine. You can have manuscripts that are wrong.
From Christians in the Arabian Peninsula. So 7th century manuscripts that would have been accessible for Christians in the 7th century. Yes, they were complete. And why do we know that? Why? Because the Assyrian church and the Ethiopian church were active on the Arabian Peninsula. The Assyrian church in the north of Arabia, the Ethiopian church in the south of Arabia.
Nothing in the middle.
Each one of them
Nothing in the middle where the Muslims would
have had their own manuscript tradition, and any Christians in the Central Arabian Peninsula would have been leaning on one of these two groups.
Well, that's only because they're either in the north or the south. What about
the
entirety of Arabia?
So the point is, now you have to identify to me some independent 7th century group of Christians in the center of Arabia. Can you do that?
I believe they're the Christians of Najran, but even they weren't a monolith.
Najran is in the south, right?
Najran's in the center.
Right.
But there weren't many.
No. Those Christians were connected to the Assyrian church.
Not all of them. They're not monolith.
No, they were correct. No. You see, you're lying, Obi. You're lying to yourself.
You didn't even know how to pronounce the place. I helped you.
And what's that got to do? What's that got to do with church history, bro?
Najran.
No.
You need to know the place.
All you've done is identify a place. All you've done is identify a place where some Christians are. You haven't identified who those Christians are. Keep up, Obi.
They are not a monolith. They were not a monolith.
Obi.
They had a difference.
Show me. Where's your evidence?
Show you what?
Where's your evidence? Because I'm giving you my evidence.
In the historical landscape of the 6th and early 7th centuries, the Arabian Peninsula was far from religiously uniform. Christianity had indeed spread to its outer regions, but it never penetrated the heartland of the Hijaz, the area that would later encompass Mecca and Medina. In the north, Christian influence came through the Assyrian Church of the East, or the Nestorians, centered in Hira, in what is now southern Iraq. Arab Christian tribes such as the Lakhmids were allied with the Persian Empire and served as important conduits of Eastern theology and culture. In contrast, the south, particularly Yemen and Najran, came under the shadow of the Ethiopian Church, or Miaphysite tradition, rooted in the Aksumite kingdom. Archaeological remains, inscriptions, and historical records all attest to vibrant Christian life in these two zones, the northern and southern edges of Arabia. Yet between these poles lay a vast religious silence, the central Hijaz. There is no archaeological, epigraphic, or manuscript evidence of any functioning church, monastery, or organized Christian community in Mecca, Ta'if, or Yathrib. This absence forms a historical void in the Islamic narrative. If Muhammad truly lived among Christians, the so-called al-Kitab, people of the book, we should expect traces, ruins of chapels, crosses, or liturgical texts. The stark fact that none exist indicates that the Hijaz was a pagan environment, not a Christian one. Ironically, Islamic sources themselves indirectly confirm this silence. In the Sirah and Hadith, only one name appears linked to the gospel, Waraqah ibn Nawfal. But Waraqah was not an ordained priest, nor affiliated with any established church. He appears to have been an isolated individual who had merely read or heard fragments of religious writings, perhaps in Arabic or Syriac. In other words, Islam arose not amid a living Christian community, but in a region almost entirely disconnected from organized Christianity. When we bring together archaeological data, textual studies, and church history, the picture becomes clear. Every Christian in Arabia during the 6th century belonged either to the Assyrian Church in the north or the Ethiopian Church in the south. There was no independent Christian denomination in the Central Arabian Peninsula. Thus, if Islam emerged from that very region without any real Christian presence, the pressing question is, from where did Muhammad obtain his fragments of biblical stories found in the Quran? The most historically plausible answer is that he did not receive them from Christian theologians, but through oral traditions carried by traders, slaves, and travelers moving between north and south. Stories such as the infant Jesus speaking from the cradle or forming birds from clay trace back not to the canonical Gospels, but to Syriac apocryphal texts circulating among the Nestorians. This explains why the biblical narratives in the Quran often appear fragmented, truncated, and stripped of their original theological depth.
Right, I'll give you evidence.
What the existence of Waraqah ibn Nawfal?
Sahih al-Bukhari is an 8th century document.
Waraqah ibn Nawfal.
We're talking about the 7th century, not 9th century. Sahih al-Bukhari is a 9th century document.
Do you want to argue the veracity of Sahih Bukhari then?
Isnads can be faked,
No,
my
they
friend.
can't.
Yes, they can.
These are multiply attested
Yes,
from different places.
Yes,
Different places.
and if a person realises, oh look, everyone's trusting this isnad, then all they need to do is stick their own matin on top of that isnad, and boom, you've got a fake hadith.
Bob, one second, Bob. Your New Testament is literally predicated
Changing the topic. Changing the topic.
No, it's not.
Changing the topic.
I'm showing you something.
Changing the topic.
You believe in multiple attestation, yes?
Changing the topic.
Do you believe in multiple attestation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we have the same hadiths being recited in places like Fustat in Egypt. We have same hadiths being said in Damascus, in Persia, in the Transjordan area, in Yemen.
And all that means is that they were invented earlier.
In Tunisia,
all that means is that they were invented earlier.
So then that means we can't trust anything in history then.
What it means is that hadith sciences can't be trusted.
No, because
it's not a science.
If one person is saying,
do Shia and Sunni agree on all the hadith?
They do accept some of our hadith.
No, so the answer to that question is no, isn't it?
Some of our hadith.
So the answer to that question is no, isn't it?
Benefit them, they don't use
so Shia and Sunni do not agree on which hadiths to use.
Not on all
don't they?
Hadiths, no.
Don't they? There we go. So Muslims themselves don't trust one another's hadith science. There we go. So Shia and Sunni don't trust one another's hadith science. If Muslims can't agree about which hadiths to use, why should I trust it?
The majority
do
of
all
Muslims
Christians agree on which gospels to use?
I believe they do, yes.
There you go. And that's the difference. Multiple attestation and universal agreement by the Christians, multiple attestation and dispute by the Muslims.
It's a false analogy, bro.
You're using the hadiths as evidence to your argument. Do you even remember why you were bringing the hadiths up?
Yes.
Why?
Yes, because I want to show you that Waraqah ibn Nawfal from Sahih Bukhari was a Christian who believed the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned in the Injil.
Which brings up a different problem.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Doesn't bring up any problem. It actually backs my claim up.
No,
That's why
it brings up a different problem. No. Shall I tell you why it brings up a different problem?
Do we need to explain to you the concept of...
No, I know that hadith. I know that hadith. Muhammad receives the revelation. Right. He thinks he's possessed by a jinn or a demon. And then what does he do? He says, hide me, hide me. And then he goes to Khadijah. He goes, and who's she? A pagan woman.
Well, we don't know. We don't know what she was.
Right? She was a pagan woman.
We know that her uncle was a Christian, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Right? And then they go to a Christian. So according to Muslims, based upon the idea that Christians are misguided, we have the foundations of Islam. And they have an invented character, this character that didn't exist.
Who told you that?
It doesn't exist, bro. This is a 9th century story.
That's your claim.
It's a 9th century story.
It's also mentioned in...
Why? Now,
what? Earlier.
It's simply a story, my friend, that comes centuries after Muhammad.
It's mentioned in the Syriac.
Centuries after Muhammad.
When was the Syriac?
In the study of early Islamic history, Waraqah ibn Nawfal is often portrayed as a Christian bridge, the figure said to have affirmed Muhammad's first spiritual experience in the cave of Hira. In classical Islamic narratives, he is described as Khadijah's cousin, a man who knew the gospel and advised Muhammad that the being who appeared to him was Al-Namus al-Akbar, the same angel who came to Moses. Yet when this story is examined through a historical and textual lens, Waraqah stands on very unstable ground. He does not appear in any contemporary records, but only within Islamic traditions that took shape 1 to 3 centuries after the events they claim to describe. The earliest text to mention Waraqah appears in the work of Ibn Ishaq, who died around 767 CE, over 100 years after Muhammad's death. Even then, Ibn Ishaq's original work no longer survives. What we read today is a later, heavily edited version by Ibn Hisham from the 9th century. This means the story of Waraqah only entered Islamic tradition after Islam had already become an established religious system. Such a long chronological gap shows that we are not dealing with eyewitness testimony, but with a literary reconstruction created by later Muslim writers seeking to provide a theologically coherent origin story for Muhammad's prophetic call. In the earliest strata of Islamic narrative, Muhammad is depicted as frightened and trembling, even fearing that he had been possessed by a spirit or demon after his encounter in the cave. To resolve this troubling image, later Sirah authors introduced the character of Waraqah, a learned Arab Christian, whose purpose was to reframe Muhammad's experience as divine rather than demonic. Thus, the literary function of Waraqah becomes clear. He was not a historical witness, but a symbolic figure, invented to lend theological legitimacy to the beginnings of Islam. There is no archaeological, epigraphic, or manuscript evidence from the 7th century that mentions Waraqah ibn Nawfal. No Byzantine, Syriac, or Ethiopian source, despite their active Christian presence around Arabia, ever refers to such a person. The name Waraqah exists only within Islamic literature, and if there truly had been an Arab Christian who possessed an Arabic gospel and personally knew Muhammad, some trace of him should have survived outside Islamic writings. Yet the complete silence of all non-Muslim sources points to an internal literary creation, not a historical individual.